Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with 10 great light classical conductors. Yeah, light music, it's an interesting term, actually, light music. It has nothing to do with the quality of the music, of course. Only the fact that it seems to exist in a sphere designed to give us simple pleasure without having to get into too much, like, agony and misery. But boy, otherwise it's as great as any other music. Easily as great as any other music. Requires just as much skill, sometimes more skill, to conduct well. And there's tons of it. Tons and tons and tons and tons of it. And so without further ado, here are the 10 great, absolutely greatest light classical music conductors. Number 1, Willi Boskovsky. Of course, former concertmaster of the Vienna Philharmonic. Boy, could he do Strauss and all of that light Viennese fluffy stuff that surrounded Strauss. Waltzes, polkas, quadrilles, and he recorded a ton of it. Absolutely a ton of it, for Decca, for the most part. And marvelously so, usually with the Vienna Philharmonic, and they all got along, and they just schmoozed, and he did the original New Year's concerts, tons of New Year's concerts, and he did them extremely well, much better than most of the subsequent people did them. So Willi Boskovsky is definitely on the list. Next, Thomas Beecham, of course. He called his encores and light pieces lollipops. They were Beecham's lollipops, but the fact that he created an entire category of such things, which he played with incredible style and joie de vivre and all of that, wonderful French things, French stuff. In fact, a lot of the pieces themselves were French, overtures and lighter things, and little pieces by Delius. Light music composers did some real musicological work, some actual important discovery for the rest of us. And Beecham was no exception. All of these little things that he did, Sibelius, bitlets, and all that stuff. And he did them just superbly well. It was wonderful. Next, Felix Slatkin. Well, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Felix Slatkin was the father of Leonard Slatkin. And he was also a superb violinist. He was a member of the Hollywood String Quartet. He was played in innumerable, Hollywood orchestras, and things like that. In film scores. That's how they all got there. They made their living along with his wife Eleanor Aller, who was a cellist, and they were superb musicians. And Felix Slatkin was a great light music conductor. He did things at the Hollywood Bowl. He did fabulous Gershwin. He did all the usual culprits, and Copland and Appalachian Spring, which is not really light music, but it sort of gets played that way. He did wonderful, wonderful work. And there's a box of his stuff on Scribendum, which you can get. They were EMI recordings for the most part, and first class, absolutely a first class guy. A little bit more recently, John Mauceri. John Mauceri is people forget about him, but we do have a box. I don't know, do I have it sitting over there? I did have it sitting over there. We talked about it fairly recently, in fact. He has specialized in restoring Hollywood film scores, in restoring the American musical theater stuff, in ferreting out all of those goodies. He did a lot of work in Decca's Entartete Musik series. He's a first-class conductor with real musical curiosity and the ability to project it vividly and with great enthusiasm. He doesn't get as much attention as I think his work deserves. He's really an important voice in the recovery of some of the best American light music, and which is some of the best of the world's light music, and he deserves credit as such. After Mauceri, Rudolph Stolz. Rudolph Stolz has this big RCA box. He was a Viennese operetta guy. He was a composer and a performer, and he plays Strauss with echtitude, echtness, echtacity, all of the echt things, authentic Viennese aplomb, He's wonderful. He's absolutely wonderful. That RCA box didn't last in the catalog very long. It's really a pity because it's first class. He's right up there with Boskovsky, and he knows that music like the back of his hand. And then there's his own music, too, which is wonderful. He's a terrific light music composer, of whom there were so many, but not all of them were great conductors. And Stolz really was. Next, Morton Gould. Here's the second time I've mentioned Morton Gould. Morton Gould is one of those guys who is, lurking in the recesses of the American musical experience, who deserves vastly more credit than he gets. I think actually, and this is just me talking, but reading between the lines and looking at the histories of the period in like the 50s and 60s and what other artists like Bernstein and Copland said about Morton Gould, I think there was just a tremendous amount of jealousy. Morton Gould had his own orchestra, and he made wonderful collections of light classics and popular hits and arrangements and things, jungle drums and all that great stuff. He was marvelous at that stuff, and he was a first-class composer. He was a first-class composer of both serious and light music, and music that sort of skirted the edge of the genre. The American symphoniets, particularly the Latin American symphoniette, which is a work of genius, one of the great pieces of light music in the entire 20th century, which Felix Slatkin, by the way, conducted incredibly well, as did Morton Gould himself. He was a splendid conductor, a splendid composer, and a great light music guy. And because he had his own orchestra and he had his own, he recorded mostly for RCA, and he was making lots of records in the popular music field, the serious hoity-toity classical people were very jealous. I mean, I just know there was a lot of jealousy out there. And it's really unfortunate because it counted against his later reputation, because of course the hoity-toity serious people wrote the history books. They wrote the books on classical music in the 20th century, and they made sure to omit Morton Gould to the extent possible. But he had his supporters. I mean, Dmitri Mitropoulos being one of them, as I mentioned before. Boy, do we need a big Morton Gould box from RCA that gives a comprehensive view of those brilliant living stereo productions. God, they were fun. I mean, we do have Morton Gould's Chicago Symphony box, which is very, very good. But there's more. There's tons more. And it deserves some serious exposure. After Morton Gould, Eugene Ormandy, of course, great old Eugene Ormandy of the Philadelphia Orchestra. The best conductors were never ashamed to let their hair down. Not that Ormandy had much hair to let down, but let his to relax a little bit. And the Philadelphia Orchestra under Ormandy made a reams of absolutely wonderful light music discs. I mean, The Age of Elegance, I think, was my favorite. It's all sort of, late Baroque, early classical pieces, by Handel and Boccherini and people like that. Oh my God, it's wonderful. They played things at the highest standard, whether it was light music or not light music. Of course, Ormandy did plenty of Strauss waltzes. He did choruses with the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. He did the obligatory Christmas albums and all that stuff. And they did it so, so well. My goodness, those are marvelous records. And the light pieces that you found at Pop's concerts, like we just talked about, the Danse Macabre by Saint-Saëns and the Bacchanal from Samson and Delilah, Nutcracker, Russian ballet suites, all of those things. They did it with total 100% conviction. And that's what you need to do because, like I said, it's not an issue of quality. It's some of the greatest music in the world, and it needs to be played as such. And we have a visitor. Finster, she loves her light music. Don't you, dear? I know you do. I know you do. You love light music. Well, anyway, so we had Eugene Ormandy, and here's another one. There we go. Who we didn't mention, who we did mention in our list of 40 like other conductors, and who deserves tons and tons of credit. Frederick Fennell, the great band guy who also, with the Rochester Pops and other groups on Mercury Living Presence, did amazing recordings of people like Leroy Anderson and Mexican things. That was a band thing, I think, wasn't it? Hi-Fi a la Mexicana. I don't know. There was light music. There was band music. Sometimes those two genres intermingle. And gosh, he was good at that stuff. I mean, those Mercury Living Presence discs are classics. They're all classics. They're amazing. And after Fennell, Leopold Stokowski. My goodness, he could conduct anything. And his list of encores, first of all, there were the Bach transcriptions, which he used as his calling cards that were absolutely marvelous. Not just the toccata and fugue in G minor. There was the little fugue, and there were the chorale preludes that he did, and Sheep May Safely Graze, and all of those goodies. Oh, they were just lovely. But Stokowski would also do Clark's Trumpet Voluntary and strange early music mixed with strange late music and everything in between. You know, he was omnivorous, absolutely omnivorous. And since he diddled and tinkered constantly with scores and with, you know, the actual printed page, you never knew what you were going to get, but he made it all his own. It was all proprietary. And there are just phenomenal collections of things that he did all throughout his career of lighter music that are just phenomenal. However, the king of light music, of course, you all know who it is, Arthur Fiedler with the Boston Pops, who was with the Boston Pops for like 50 years or something. I don't know, some ridiculous amount of time, and who really defined the genre of Pops concerts, Pops music, what it could be. He did everything from TV and film music to the Carmen Ballet, which he kind of discovered in the West, and overtures and suites and, oh my God, you name it. I remember watching him on television all the time, the Boston Pops broadcasts on PBS, on Channel 13. He even had guest chef Julia Child as a special concerto soloist. She cooked while he played music. I mean, that sort of, to me, you know, heaven on earth, watching something like that. You know, combining food and music is like, you know, well, you all know how I feel about that. But, you know, we badly need the Arthur Fiedler boxes. I mean, there should be two of them, one on Deutsche Grammophon and one on RCA. And I keep saying it, and we keep saying it, and you keep screaming, and we keep screaming, and maybe some year something will happen. It would be wonderful but there's so much stuff. There's just tons of it. He was a cornucopia of light musicosity and fabulous performance. So yes, he is the king of light music, or the fire chief, actually, because he loved collecting firemen's hats, firemen's helmets. So there you have it. 10 absolutely fabulous light classical music conductors who deserve as much attention and credit as the greatest of the great. Actually, some of them were, like, you know, Stokowski and Beecham and whatnot, but for the most part, and Ormandy and those guys. But really, let's not make light of light music. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. Take care.